For some time now, we have been considering inflation, the COVID-19 pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and climate change as factors behind the soaring consumer food prices. Global food prices in 2022 hit record high amid drought, while global prices for commodities such as grain, vegetable oils were highest on record that year, even after falling for 9 months in a row, according to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization report during early January 2023. The organization reported that food price index fell almost 18% below its all-time peak that had been reached earlier in March 2023, following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This, however, is far from being good news, because the downslide in global food prices is only abolishing newly established post-war and pandemic prices, but not back to normal. The normal would mean the times before COVID and before the war in Ukraine, but even during that period, food prices were up and continuing to rise rapidly. As a matter of fact, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization estimated an additional 8.5% increase in global food prices by 2027. It seems there's always been another reason behind the soaring consumer food prices for so many years, and it is something that will blow your mind. I won't keep you waiting for any longer, so let's understand what this is and how it affects global food prices right now when Asinga unfolds. Now, you don't have to be a farmer to know that the global food production relies massively on fertilizers, but in recent years, farmers have seen fertilizer prices doubling and then triple in 2020, where most key fertilizers recorded a hike of 300%. In 2021, a ton of fertilizers was under $300, but a year later in 2022, that price rose up to $1,400. This has to be one of the ways through which food prices continuously go up. In addition, high energy prices also raise fuel prices, and that obviously boosts food production costs. This then indicates that when energy prices go up, fertilizer prices will also do the same. And at that moment, farmers will find all possible means to pass those extreme costs down to consumers. And as this cycle continues, it gets too expensive for both farmers and consumers to maintain their roles at lower costs. Unfortunately, farmers don't have much of a choice. In order to keep production at reasonable levels, they have to buy synthetic fertilizers, or else they would only be able to feed less than half of the global population. You see, without synthetic fertilizers, nature alone struggles a lot to replenish nutrients in the soil. Because whenever crops are harvested, key nutrients are often removed from the ground. How, you may ask? While harvesting, many of the key nutrients come along with the crops, and they actually end up at your dinner table. This means that if soil is not artificially replenished with new nutrients through fertilizing, crop yields will deteriorate over time, and in doing so, food scarcity becomes unavoidable. But if we need fertilizing to help our soil boost crop productivity, why are these fertilizer enablers so expensive that most farmers are even starting to give up? The answer to the fluctuating fertilizer prices can be traced back to the making of this substance. If natural or artificial, the manure contains chemical elements that improve growth and productiveness of crops by enhancing natural fertility of the soil or replacing nutrient components taken from the soil by previous crops. Most common raw materials used by the phosphate sector in the making of fertilizers are ammonia and sulfur, which are also byproducts of oil and gas. But as energy prices spiraled in recent years as a response to the tight supply and demand dynamics, many fertilizer producers around the world saw a significant increase in operation costs. This means that fertilizer makers will also forward those extra costs to farmers, and farmers will be forced to extend those costs down to consumers. The thing is, without artificial fertilizers, crops may not get as much nourishment as they need. For the crops, this means low yields, but for us, this means famine and insane prices for the little of the produce that makes it to the markets. Global fertilizer shortages would also force farmers to allocating most of their production expenditure to more capable seeds and fertilizers instead of labor and machinery, which may include cutting down on farm services and productivity. In 1950, global fertilizer demand expectations depicted only 20 million tons, but as the global population continued increasing, that number reached 190 million tons by 2019. Extensive population growth means greater demand for food, and this increase will naturally mean fertilizer stocks moving higher and then raising profits. So, a lot of investors have recently shifted towards the phosphate sector, which has proved greater profit incomes, majorly from fertilizer main nutrients such as phosphorus, potassium, and nitrogen. The global fertilizer market amounted to more than $193 billion in 2021, an increase of roughly 12% in comparison with the previous year. Despite massive investments, the World Bank still estimates fertilizer prices to remain higher for a very long period of time, because of factors like record high input costs that led to widespread production cutbacks on ammonia, especially in Europe, sanctions and export restrictions on countries like Russia and China, supply disruptions faced by Belarus plus Ukraine, and robust demand, since the global fertilizer consumption remained strong throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. All of these factors mean prices are anticipated to remain historically high throughout the upcoming years unless supply returns to the international markets from Russia and Belarus. The fertilizer crisis has significantly elevated the food price index to over 10% year-over-year in July 2022, which is one of the reasons why there has been inflated prices. Currently, a combination of war-related sanctions and domestic Russian policies have limited fertilizer exports from Russia, resulting in global shortages along the fertilizer supply chain and pushing the world to the brink of another catastrophe. On top of that, shortages of the vital agricultural input stems from a combination of pandemic-fueled supply chain issues, inflation, and Russia's war in Ukraine, whereby both countries are major exporters of agricultural commodities such as fertilizers and the chemical compounds that are used to make fertilizers. Manufacturing nitrogen fertilizers uses the Haber-Bosch process that was developed in the early 1900s, which converts hydrogen and nitrogen to ammonia. Even in a modern plant, nitrogen fertilizers are produced from natural gas through several transformation steps. Natural gas, essentially methane, is upgraded by a combination with nitrogen from the air to form nitrogen fertilizers. After World War II, large-scale chemical fertilizer boomed as production plants shifted from manufacturing nitrogen for explosives to producing nitrogen for fertilizers. Nitrogen-based fertilizers have been working along with potassium-based fertilizers or potash that is mainly mined from North America. Throughout decades, fertilizers have been helping farmers worldwide to produce sustainable yields, but this costs our environment in so many ways. Using too much fertilizers can actually kill plants, but also the excessive use of fertilizers can run off into streams and lakes, which causes toxic algal blooms that are harmful to aquatic life, people, and animals. This is commonly known as nutrient pollution. Naturally, our soil has its organic fertilizers. The problem is that the availability of these nutrients vary from one place to another. And if a farmer finds himself in a region that is depleted, chemical fertilizers automatically become the follow-up option. But still, overuse can contribute to soil acidification or soil crust in some cases by reducing the content of the remaining organic matter, humus amounts, beneficial species, impeding plant growth, altering pH levels, growing pests, and leading to enormous release of greenhouse gases. Much of the applied fertilizer runs off into waterways or gets broken down by microbes in the soil, releasing the potent greenhouse gas, nitrous oxide, into the atmosphere. In 2019, the United Nations estimated fertilizers were responsible for at least 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent greenhouse gases. Now, with all these challenges, how can farmers best utilize chemical fertilizers without endangering our environment? We can look at maximizing crop yields by using a minimum amount of fertilizers efficiently, using fertilizers accurately by applying the nutrients around the base of the plant and extending to the drip line, or placing nutrients in a strip parallel to the planting growth of vegetables, but also using fertilizers where it is necessary. For example, backing away from chemical fertilizers for farmers in naturally fertile areas. And last but not least, applying right quantities at the right place and considering organic fertilizers over chemical nutrients, because organic manure does not make a crust on soil as inorganic fertilizers do most of the times. Organic fertilizers improve water movement into the soil. It adds structure to the soil and feed beneficial microbes, which makes it easier for the soil to work. It is unfortunate that the fertilizer crisis is not going away anytime soon, and this will obviously keep prices up as well. As consumer food prices remain high and wages staying constant, the future of fragile income earners worldwide also remains in question for a foreseeable period of time. Now that you know so much about the fertilizer crisis and how it affects global food prices, I recommend this next video that will tell you how and when electric cars were made. It is mind-blowing, mostly if you thought that these cars were initially made in recent years. Thank you for watching. I'll see you again in the next video.